Hey y'all, who dat and what is up? I am Jeff Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold, and that is the early stages of a hurricane outside my window. I initially thought, hey, maybe I'll just kick this episode until Thursday, and then I thought better of it because who knows whether I'm going to be able to record on Thursday? Who knows when the next time I will have electricity is? So instead, I decided I'm going to give you this standard injury report episode. Got an interview with Mark Schlereth. I'm going to get to you in the second segment. And then the third segment, I'm going to ramble about how power rankings are stupid. And we're going to get into that. If it sounds like a pretty thinly constructed episode, that's because it is. I'm just trying to get you something just in case we can't record anything for the rest of the week because it's all going to be in flux. And that's thanks to Hurricane Francine, which is causing all sorts of problems in Louisiana. It's causing some problems for the Saints, although they're navigating it as well as they can. We're going to get to that in the second half of this first segment. First things first, let's get to the injury report. We got the initial injury report for week 2, and boy, howdy, is it a long one. is it a long one? There are 13 Saints players named on the initial injury report. The good news, 4 of those players were full participants on Wednesday. So those players are Jamal Williams dealing with a shoulder issue, Rashid Shaheed dealing with a finger issue, Nick Saldiveri dealing with that calf issue, A.T. Perry dealing with that hand issue. So those guys are on the injury report, but that's a good sign that they are already full participants. It indicates that those guys should be good to go on Sunday against the Cowboys. The guys who were limited, Foster Moreau, he's in concussion protocol. It's a good sign that he was able to be limited today. The protocol kind of dictates, hey, you got to get through a limited practice, you got to get through a full practice, and you got to pass the independent neurologist exam, whatever. I have a feeling he'll be good to go, but we'll have to wait and see on that. Dallin Halker, limited with that ankle injury. He did not participate at all last week, so that's a good sign that he's trending in the right direction, hopefully, especially if Foster can't go because he's still got concussion symptoms for whatever reason. Hopefully, maybe you can get Dallin back and he can help fill that void. I thought Foster had a really good week 1, and we'll have to see. Taliesin Fuaga dealing with a back issue. Now, he had a back issue late in camp. Hopefully, this isn't something that's going to continue to be a problem. Hopefully, it's kind of just maintenance. We'll have to see. He was limited today. And then linebacker Jalen Ford. Again, this is a good one because he missed all of last week's practice. He missed the final week plus of training camp with that hamstring issue. He was back limited today. So again, a good sign that maybe he'll be able to be available. The guys who did not participate, these are the ones that are continuing from last week. You got Colin Saunders still dealing with that calf issue. He didn't practice. DeMarco Jackson dealing with that calf issue. He didn't practice. Then you also had Marshawn Lattimore, who's listed with a hip and a hamstring. He was a DMP. I don't think the hip is new. I think that is the same hip issue that he has been working back from. But the hamstring issue is something of a concern, especially when you look at the next 2 weeks. The Saints have very, very difficult wide receiver matchups. This week with CeeDee Lamb and a couple of those other guys. They got Brandon Cooks out there too with the Cowboys. And then the week after that, you got A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Those are the matchups that I really want Marshawn for, and I really want Marshawn at 100%. So we'll have to see how the week develops for him. Hamstrings, they can be finicky. It's a tough situation because you look at a guy who didn't really practice in camp, was nursing that hip issue, then you come back and mess up your hamstring. A lot of times you see injuries like this, it's kind of an overcompensation issue, and we'll have to see. But that's frustrating. Hopefully that isn't something that lingers. Then you had Tyrann Mathieu, who missed today with a heel issue. It didn't sound super significant, but and Tyrann has been kind of a Iron Man for the Saints since he's been here. He has not missed a game. So I have faith that Tyrann's going to be able to go. But again, we'll have to wait and see. He did not participate. And then Lucas Patrick dealing with a toe issue. He left the game at halftime against the Panthers, and Landon Young took over for the second half. Now, I think that was more about Nick Saldiveri not quite being ready. He was the 8th offensive lineman and the emergency offensive lineman. They went with Landon because they felt like he was ready to go and they felt a little more comfortable with him at that point. I think if you go throughout the week of practice and you're planning for Lucas to not be out there, I do think you'll want to go with Nick Saldiveri. I really do. And we'll have to see. You know, maybe he's still not at a point where they trust him. We'll have to see how this develops for Lucas. It would be a frustrating way for him to give that job back. It's how he got the job in the first place, so he can't be super upset. The Cowboys injury report, we'll go through this quickly. They have a few issues too. Tight end Jake Ferguson dealing with a knee problem. He is a DMP. Now, if he can't get out there, this would be the second consecutive week the Saints get some beneficial tight end absences, but we'll have to wait and see. Rookie defensive end Marshawn Nealon dealing with a calf issue. He did not participate. And then tight end John Stevens dealing with a hamstring issue. He was a DMP. Rest of the list, wide receiver Brandon Cooks. He was limited, but it was a rest day, not injury related. Cornerback CJ Goodwin, foot issue. He was limited. And then the next three, all rest days. It's Eric Kendricks, DeMarcus Lawrence, and Zach Martin. So the Cowboys are clearly going with a rest strategy. It's interesting because they're so early in the season to be giving these guys rest days. These are veterans, but they're not old guys. This isn't like last year with Ryan Ramczyk and Jimmy Graham. It's just a choice that they're making to give some of these guys rests on Wednesdays. Maybe it's because it's week one and the rehab this week took a little longer because you're getting back into game shape. I don't know. But that is the injury report. It's going to be one that we have to monitor closely because there is a lot of key names on there for the Saints. Now, maybe one issue was they practiced early today, and this is where we can start getting into our Hurricane Francine talk because, hey, that's always fun. We're going to get into it. Really not a ton of changes for the Saints this week other than they moved up practice today by about an hour, and coaches are going to be having a slumber party at the team facility. Now, Dennis Allen wouldn't call it a slumber party, but I'm going to call it a slumber party because you're getting all the coaches together. You're going to tell ghost stories around a campfire. No, the issue is they're trying to keep this week's schedule going into Dallas as static as they can so that they're not going into Sunday feeling underprepared. And I can't fault it, right? Now, they're letting the players go home early, be with their families, whatever. It's always been a thing with NFL. It's always been a thing around the NFL. It's like the players get all these luxuries of like they get paid the most. They get to go home. The coaches work all the hard hours. They never see their families. They have to ride it out through a hurricane. That's what it is. But they're trying to keep the game prep as static as possible. So coaches are going to be hanging out at the facility doing their typical work throughout the day. Today, Francine's supposed to make landfall sometime around like 5 p.m. on Thursday. It's going to be a high category 1 storm. You know, it's a similar approach that they took when Zeta hit in 2020. If y'all remember Zeta, it hit New Orleans head on. I remember because the eye literally went over my house. I've never seen anything like it, you know, but you know, the storm's blowing, it's moving pretty quickly. Then all of a sudden it's like sunny outside. You're like, what in the world? And you go out and you look up, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's what an eye of a storm does look like. All right. But you know, it was, I feel like we're going to be in a similar situation here. Going to be a lot of outages, going to be a lot of wind, some damage, maybe. I don't think the flooding is going to be a particularly huge issue, maybe for a few minutes until the pumps can catch up. But personally, you know, I'm not super concerned about it. It's really a question of, okay, are we going to lose power? And for how long? And that was the big issue with Zeta. I was fortunate to ring Zeta because if you look at the energy outage map, it was like a brick red map. And there was this one little green line in the middle of this sea of red. And that was the street I lived on. It was the strangest thing. We had power. No one else around us did. And that's just kind of the randomness of a hurricane. Now, the Saints are planning to make up their meeting time tomorrow. So it's likely that the Thursday practices take place a little later in the day. But, you know, here's just some quick clips from Derek Carr, Dennis Allen, Demario Davis kind of talking about the hurricane, and then we can get into the rest.
Is this your first one of these? This is my first one. Second. We lived in Houston during one of them. So, yeah.
And what did you add to your to-do list this week? Were you boarding anything?
I just made sure everyone told me here to make sure to go get gas. And so I went and got gas because I didn't know, and the lines were crazy, you know, for that. So I was like, hey, that's the one thing I didn't even know to do, but I'm glad someone told me because I wouldn't have known that. So we went and filled up my wife's car, my truck, and now we're good.
Your first one here, difficult to concentrate or easy to compartmentalize once you get
It's easy to compartmentalize because there's so much just on our plate, but at the same time, like, we're playing a game, so like you get done and then you think about just like, our city, the families, we're going to have to go through, this afternoon and tomorrow, whatever it is. And, just praying everybody's safe, there's more important things than football right now. But at the same time, while we're at home, spending time with our family, making sure we're studying and staying on top of our game plan because there's still a game that we have to go try and win.
Yeah, before I begin, I just first want to let everybody know in the city that our hearts and our prayers are with everybody. We had our team prayer this morning. We were praying not just over ourselves, but just over our city and all the surrounding areas just through this storm. I think when you think about, storms that continuously hit this area, it becomes kind of like a Sunday where you can have all the predictions in the world, but it's still unknown as to what's going to take place. And I think that's the part. And so, some areas have favorable predictions, some don't. And you just never know. And so we're just praying, hope everybody's safe, hope everybody's hunkered down. Those that were able to get away, you're still in our prayers as well. It's just, it's a serious thing. And so we just want to know, like, even in the midst of all this going on and what we have to focus on, our hearts and prayers are with everybody.
With just some of the younger guys that maybe haven't been through something like this, do they lean on guys like you for questions at all?
Yeah, people who new to this, they don't necessarily know what to expect, and so, the people who have been through it multiple times, kind of have a guess, but, we don't know for sure either. So I think it's just one of those things that we're all just trying to make it through together. So.
Yeah. I think that was the reason why we felt like, there's a lot that goes into an evacuation. It's not just we pick up and we go somewhere. You got to find a place to stay. You're trying to make sure you're taking care of the families. So there's a lot that goes into that. I know a few years ago, I can't remember exactly when it was, we've been through a few of these. So I remember it was a Cat 1 that came right through New Orleans that it wasn't a practice day, but we were game planning through that. So, look, we want everybody to be safe, and yet we felt like we could still get our work done and keep everybody safe and not have to try to go through all the logistics of what it takes to go through an evacuation.
Does that qualify as a slumber party?
That's not what I would call it. All right, but I think there'll be a few people that,
Yeah, so I mean, it's just a situation where these guys are trying to focus on the game. Because here's one thing that I guarantee you: if the Saints go out there and lay an egg against Dallas, no one's going to give them any excuses. Oh, well, they were dealing with a hurricane. No, it's the NFL. Life goes on. So the Saints are kind of being realistic about that. You can't just give guys a day off and then say, well, we'll figure it out. No, these games are too important. This season is too important. So they're finding a way, but at the same time, they're cognizant of the fact that, like, no, there's stuff that people are dealing with, and you got to give people time to take care of that. Derek Carr was funny. He was, this is his first. It's funny. Some of these guys have been here through storm after storm after storm, right? Like DeMario's been here through multiple hurricanes. Alvin's been here through multiple hurricanes. Kim's been here through. He's probably lost count by now of how many hurricanes he's dealt with. But like a guy like Derek is in his second year. We didn't get hit with a hurricane last year. There was really no hurricanes to speak of in 2023. So this is the first time he's really dealing with it since he was a kid living in Houston. So he's like, yeah, everyone told me I need to go get gas. So I sat in line at a gas station, filled up the cars. But, that's really what it is. When you live here for long enough, you get a lot of text messages saying, are you going to be okay? And you're like, guys, it's going to be fine. And that's because everyone thinks like, well, Katrina and what happened. And then they forget, well, Katrina was really like the big issue with Katrina is the levees got breached. I think that's something that anytime New Orleans and hurricane get said in the same sentence, the Weather Channel shows up and everyone freaks out. You kind of just got to go about your business, make sure you got your preparations done, and then listen to some really loud winds whipping by your windows. But that's about it for now. We'll see how this goes. We'll see how the rest of the week is impacted. We'll see if I can record another podcast this week. Y'all say thank you to Steve Geller. Steve can't be on this podcast because he is at the radio station. He's going to be hosting from 10 p.m. until 2 a.m. on WWL for all these updates. So don't ever say Steve is not a dedicated employee to WWL radio. They didn't ask me to do it, and I am heartbroken that they didn't task me with that responsibility. But I am here trying to get you a podcast. So we're going to get into the rest of it. We got through the injury report. We got through basically all the Hurricane Francine information that is really there to give. And we'll see how the rest of the week goes. We're going to hit the break, come back. We're going to hear from Mark Schlereth, who had some really interesting comments on the offense. He called the game. We heard from him prior to the game. Let's hear from him after the game and see how he felt about Klint Kubiak, his first day calling the plays in New Orleans, how Derek Carr ran the offense, all that good stuff. So who dat? This is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. That's Francine. You might hear her outside the window. Otherwise, we'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. It is a week 2 winning scenario. The Saints are heading to Dallas feeling really good about themselves. Hopefully, Hurricane Francine allows them to go into that week feeling like they are not underprepared. And we'll have to wait and see. Saints are pretty good at this. So I have a feeling that they'll be able to figure it out. They'll be working on generator power if the power goes out, right? They're not going to allow that to, they're not just going to go home and say, well, we'll figure it out. They're going to go and, they should feel good about themselves. And, we're going to go through some of the power rankings in the final segment because, a lot of the reaction is, well, it was just the Panthers. Well, it's really, you can say that, but at the same time, you look at that offense, you look at how it performed, and I don't care who you're playing. It just looked easy. Like everything about that game looked easier than it should have been. And that's in part because of the opponent you're playing, but it's in part because that offense didn't seem to miss a step. Like you got out there and it looked like you've been running that offense for years, not weeks, not a month. It looked like Derek Carr lived in that scheme. It looked like the offensive line has been running these types of blocking schemes for decades at this point. And it's remarkable to see that with a group that we looked at going in as, holy crap, what's going to happen with this offensive line group? What's going to happen with Trevor Penning? What's going to happen with Taliesin Fuaga? Instead of coming out of that week talking about, man, what are the Saints going to do with tackle? We're talking about, wow, Taliesin Fuaga was one of the top graded tackles in the NFL that week. And, when you're up 30-0 at halftime, it becomes really easy because you've already demoralized your opponent. How much are you going to really get out of them? So you really want to look at, the first few drives when the game was still in doubt and how that all operated. But a guy who definitely watched every snap of that game and has some feelings about it is Mark Schlereth. We're going to have him on every week. He just happens to be our regular contributor throughout the season on WWL, and he was calling the game. And I'm sure he's going to end up getting a few more Saints games throughout the course of the year. So I don't know, his takes on this offense and this team in particular, I find really interesting. So let's hear from Mark and what he had to say about the Saints-Panthers game on Sunday.
I'll be honest with you. In watching the Saints offense play, it was like, pinch me. Come on, 9 straight possessions you scored. It's like, you got to be kidding me. Even in the wildest dreams for Saints fans, you'd have never thought you'd see that type of efficiency. And Mark, we talk about it so often. They won in the trenches. And I thought that was the key to this football game.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. They were tremendous. And there's a couple of things, that really resonated with me when I was talking, or resonated with me when I was talking to Dennis Allen. I talked to, Klint Kubiak, and I talked to Derek Carr, and as I was prepping for the game. And I think a couple of things. One, that's an offense that Klint Kubiak has brought to the Saints that Derek Carr is so familiar with. And it's the offense that he absolutely loves. And I talked to him years ago. I did a game when he was with the Raiders, and John Gruden was his coach, and he loves the offense. He's so comfortable with the offense, the verbiage of the offense, the reads of the offense, all those things. And, of course, there are a few little, wrinkles and details that have changed a bit, but the base, the root of that offense is the same. And so that is, a huge comfort for Derek Carr. And then I think the other thing that's really interesting, because you talk about Klint Kubiak, also he's got an assistant that was a guy that I'm very familiar with, that I've known forever, and that was a coach with the Broncos when I played there, by the name of Rick Dennison. And Rick is kind of, a senior assistant, and he does a lot of the run game plan and all that kind of stuff. And he's a big believer, and this goes all the way back to my Denver days, of what we used to call it and run it, or tank plays. And what that is we're going to call this play regardless of what we get. It's good against everything. We're going to call this play, and we're just going to come off the ball and try to shorten your neck. We're going to run it regardless. And in today's game, it's really interesting, because a lot of these young coaches that get jobs, they sell these owners on, hey, man, we've got the perfect call for everything they give us. So they call it premium plays. We're going to get into premium play. And the problem with being in a premium play, and you may be like, hey, we're going to run towards the down safety or away from the down safety, or we're going to run, if a guard is uncovered, what we call a bubble look, we're going to run to the bubble or away from the bubble, or whatever whatever our game plan is. The issue with that is oftentimes it has you playing on your heels, and you just want to line up and just want to come off the ball and try to punish people. And that's what they did the other day. And I tell you what, Kamara just looked great in the offense. His ability to, it won't be a one-cut kind of slash runner, be powerful in that. I just thought the whole offensive system just looked tremendous. And of course, grain of salt, because it is the Carolina Panthers who picked up, 6-7 guys off the waiver wire and ended up starting most of them. So, you got to take that into consideration. But the Saints looked really, really good.
And I told this to Bob yesterday. It seemed to me that they are moving Derek Carr in the pocket more than certainly a year ago. Derek's always been known as a pocket guy, but they looked as though there were like design type plays for him to throw the football much more off the waggle. Is that part of this Kubiak system, to move the quarterback a little left, a little right, and have him on the move?
Yeah, certainly. It's certainly all the boot game. So off the wide zone handoff, and that's kind of the base. When you start talking about this offense, it's wide zone and it's tight zone, or all the boot keep stuff that comes off of that. So you can get outside the pocket. You eliminate half the field. What you do is you create really easy throws. Normally there's a guy, in the flat, then there's a guy running like a deep corner, and then you're bringing somebody from the opposite side of the field. So a tight end is dragging across on a low cross. And what it creates is this kind of strong side. You change the formation, or you change the strength of the passing side, and you create this strong side passing triangle with a flat, a deep, and a medium, a medium crosser coming into the eye side of the quarterback. And it's half the field. You get 3 receivers in there, and they become really easy kind of linear progression throws. And the other thing is, then you can pull up a little bit short. You can pull up off the boot, and you can have throwback systems and everything else. So, yeah, it's a big part of what this West Coast / boot keep offense, or waggle as you called it. I always called waggle to the front side, when you open up and, you're a front side run, and boot keep is when you turn your back to the defense, go away from the runner. But regardless, it's shifting the pocket, moving the pocket. And, it's funny, when I was at practice on Friday watching them do a bunch of this stuff, I had forgotten what a great athlete Derek Carr is.
He is
Derek
a good
Carr,
athlete, yeah.
He's a really good athlete, and he throws the ball exceptionally well on the run. So why not take advantage of it? And I think the other thing that happens when you play that system and you do that, you're going to get – now, he's always been a high completion percentage guy, right? But all of a sudden, if I'm running, 8-10 boot keeps out the backside or waggles to the front side, you're going to be – like if you're doing 12 of those, you're going to be 12 for 12 to start the game. And then if I complete 50% of my other passes, all of a sudden I'm sitting at 75, 80% completion percentage. And – and I'm at 250 to 350 yards, and we're dominating. But again, all that stuff really comes off the run game and what you do in the run game. And if you're successful in the run game, well, then the boot keep game is going to really open up.
Yeah, and thanks again to Mark for coming on WWL. You can go check out that entire interview. There's a bit more to it at WWL.com. But no, I agree with a lot that he said there. And, the run game in particular and the approach to the run game, I think is going to be really important for this Saints team. Not only because, establishing the ground game is important, not only because getting Alvin involved on the ground is going to be important, but because when you're able to run the ball and you're able to impose your will on an opposing team, that stays with them. They cannot then just sit back and say, well, it doesn't matter. We're going to play the run on the way to the quarterback. No, you have to play the run and worry about the quarterback as a secondary threat. And that's what the Saints were able to do to the Panthers. Right. And it just looked like everything they did, they looked confident in it. And I think that does kind of go back to what he's talking about of like, okay, you're going to run these plays. Now, I think it's easy for an offensive coordinator, for a coach to get a little bogged down and know we want to be in the perfect play against the perfect look every time. But that's not always necessary. Like if you feel like you understand what a defense does well, and it was very clear the Saints felt like they understood how to attack that Ejiro Evero defense last week, then at a certain point, you just got to get into that play and run it. You just got to call it and haul it. And that's a direct quote from Klint Kubiak. You just call it and haul it. Like you know what you want to do. You understand how you're going to beat this defense, and you're not going to get bogged down in making every single check at the line, trying to get in the absolute perfect play. Because, and I think the cliche is like perfect is the enemy of great. Great is the enemy of good. Like sometimes you just got to go out there and run a play. And, if you trust your game plan, if you trust your scouting, you trust your prep, then you should be able to go out there and run a play. A few times throughout the course of that game, there were some interesting elements that it just seemed like the Saints were confident in what they were doing and the Panthers weren't, right? One thing that I highlighted on Twitter that, I think we're going to overlook all the time is the benefit of having Taysom Hill and not only being able to do things, but being able to execute in ways that a quarterback is going to execute. We talk about, wildcat quarterback, whatever. There was a play in that game. If you go back, I tweeted this, it was the second drive of the game. It was 2nd and 10, right? So you fail on 1st and 10. I think it was an incompletion. It was the play that Derek Carr rolled out. It was only 4 incompletions, so it was easy to remember which is which. Derek Carr rolled out. There was really nothing there. He kind of dumped the ball at Juwan Johnson's feet, failed play on 1st down, move on. Now, it's probably not a great feeling for a quarterback to come off the field, or in this case, he didn't come off the field. You then have Derek split out wide, and Taysom lines up to take the snap. Now, keep in mind, when you're doing that, and you might ask, well, why bother splitting Derek out wide? Why not just take him off the field and let Taysom get an extra blocker? And to me, the argument has always been, and I think that this is why you do it, you're calling that play because you like that look against the personnel they're giving you with Taysom Hill in your personnel. They're reacting in a certain way. And when you see the personnel that you want to attack, you can force them to stay in that personnel by not substituting, by not taking Derek off the field, in which case they're going to put personnel on the field that they like, their preferred personnel package for what they assume is going to be a Taysom Hill QB rep. Well, what if I can run Taysom Hill against a package they have not practiced? If I can get Taysom Hill on the field against a group of players that did not spend all week preparing to try to stop Taysom Hill at the QB position, advantage me. If I call a timeout, if I take Derek off the field, they're going to adjust. And what happened on that play that I appreciated was Rashid Shaheed got confused. Right? If you go back and you watch, that's tough. They might not show it. Even on the All-22, you only saw the end of it. But Rashid kind of got mixed up on where he was supposed to go. He needed to be in motion, or he needed to be aligned in the backfield. And instead, he kind of went in motion early. There was about 10 seconds left on the play clock, right? Even Deuce on the broadcast was like, call a timeout. You're gonna take a penalty. Instead, Taysom calmly just redirects Rashid, has him line up, sends him in motion, runs the play anyway. You get 9 yards on 2nd down on a play that, if this is any other Wildcat quarterback, you're either calling a timeout or they don't even notice, and you get a legal procedure penalty or whatever. Like you end up losing yards. In this case, it was a successful play for 9 yards, and then you're in 3rd and 1. You're able to run for a 1st down. You continue. That's the drive that ended with a touchdown to Foster Moreau. So I just think we overlook Taysom. Like everyone wants to talk about Taysom as a gadget guy. They want to talk about Taysom as this. He's just a very, very useful piece to have on offense. He's just a guy that you can trust in situations. And if I'm an offensive coordinator, I cannot have enough of those types of players. Guys that can rescue you from lost downs and have a positive impact in what they can do offensively. And so I just think there's so much to like from that game, and there's so much to like when you go back and watch it on film. At the end of the day, if this team can get even remotely close to the offensive line performance that you got in week one, this is a playoff team, in my opinion. How good can they be? I don't know. But that's, to me, was the question mark, was the wild card all offseason is this offensive line going to torpedo your chances for success? And the caveat was always, hey, this offense should be able to help that offensive line and protect it a little bit, but you never really know. But yeah, we'll see how that develops. We'll see if Trevor Penning reverts back to whatever he was this preseason when he faces up against Micah Parsons. We'll see how much they actually have to scheme to protect those offensive linemen. Fuaga on the left side, where do they put DeMarcus Lawrence? Where do they put Micah Parsons? Do they move him around? Do they try to make things difficult? We'll have to wait and see. I expect to see a lot more QB motion or QB bootlegs, the boot keep game, as Mark Schlereth called it, the waggle on the other side. If you're going with the run, the boot keep away from the run. That's the phrasing that I've heard too. So we'll have to see. But either way, it's really hard to be upset about anything that's happened with the Saints over the last couple weeks. And hopefully that feeling continues. Because if they go out and they beat the Cowboys after dealing with a hurricane, it's going to be hard for people to complain about what they have done. Heck, if they even go out there and play a close game against the Cowboys and come back and say, hey, we feel like we have a really good chance to beat the Eagles in our building, I'll feel pretty good about it. But I need them to avoid going out there and getting blown out. And so I think that's why the prep time is important and making sure you're giving yourself the best chance to succeed. So we'll figure that out. But that's it for this segment. We're going to come back. I'm going to complain about some power rankings. Then I'm going to close this out, trying to get this episode done, edited, and posted before what I assume will be an extended power outage. So that's why I'm kind of rushing through things. But thanks, everyone, for watching. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Thanks, everyone, for chiming in wherever you do. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that either on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please make sure to subscribe and leave a rating and a review. I always ask that, almost never get them, but I'm going to keep asking. So if you want me to stop asking, go do it. That's how you can stop me from constantly asking you to subscribe, rate, and review by doing it. Because I am talking directly to you. Anyway, this is Inside Black and Gold. We will be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. One more segment here on this. Let's get it done quick before the power goes out episode heading into week 2 in a matchup with the Dallas Cowboys. But first things first, let's go back and talk some trash about all the analysts who are not willing to give the Saints any credit for winning a game by 37 points, but they are more than happy to give the Bucs all the credit in the world. Let's dive into it. So one thing I wanted to do on Tuesday was just go through all the power rankings. When all the power rankings get updated, all the sites that like to say they have an idea of what they're talking about, like to go through and say, hey, this team is here and this team is here and this team got better and this team got worse and whatever and whatever and whatever. So if you want to go, I tweeted all these. I went through and I just rounded them all up to see where we are. And so let's just go through them first of all. Let's go through them and say, okay, this is the network. This is where the Saints are. This is how far they moved up. Because every single one they did move up. I will give some folks credit for that, although Pro Football Talk is just a travesty. Anyway, first up, ESPN, they have them at 23. Last week they were at 25, so +2. NFL.com has them at 24th. Again, 32 NFL teams. A team beats another team by 37 points. Their reaction is, we're going to move the team that lost to the bottom of the rankings and give the team that won zero credit at all. NFL.com has them at 24th. They were at 28th, +4. Bleacher Report, I give them some credit, has them up to 18, which seems a little bit more fair. That's +5. They started them at +23. They started them at number 23, so it's a solid rise up. CBS Sports, 25th. Again, that's just stupid. +2 from 27 where they started. Pro Football Talk had them started at 24. You beat a team by 37 points. You go up 1 spot. USA Today has them ranked 24th. They moved up 3 spots from 27. Yahoo Sports, 22nd, move them up 5 spots from 27. I can't complain if you're going to move a team up 5 spots, but again, at a certain point, you got to admit, hey, we were wrong. Fox Sports has them at 21. That's up from 28, which is 7 spots. The Sporting News has them at 20th. That's another +7. And, a couple that I did not include in here because they are subscriber only. And The Athletic has the Saints at number 11. So I give them credit for that. And the Pro Football Focus has them at number 13 and has the Bucs at number 14. Now, Pro Football Focus is a weird one because they're not really doing a lot of, like all of these are easy to criticize because it's all just arbitrarily chosen and it's all based on vibes and this idea that I know anything about anything and I should be telling you that you are the 25th worst team in the league after you beat a team by 37 points. Whereas Pro Football Focus is usually basing it on metrics, right? And they're saying, okay, we're grading everyone on this. And if you rank here, you're here. If you rank there, you're there. And that's why when you look at that, you're like, wow, it's crazy. In this metric, the Saints and the Bucs are right next to each other, but everyone else in the world seems to think the Bucs are 25 spots better than the Saints in these power rankings. And I'll be the first to tell you, you're full of shit. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. The Bucs and the Saints are the same goddamn team, but for whatever reason, you like the Bucs and you hate the Saints, so you're going to trash them. Now, the ESPN one doesn't really have anything to hate other than the kind of my standing frustration with these that I can't find anyone that explains to me why the Saints are 23rd or 24th or 25th, other than the fact that you think the Panthers are bad. But again, other teams played bad teams, and you're not holding them back because of that fact, right? We are giving the Bucs, like, listen to CBS Sports blurb about the Bucs, who beat the Commanders 37-20, the team that picked number 2 in the draft and has a rookie quarterback in his first game, versus the Saints, who beat the Panthers 47-10 and has a number 1 overall pick going into his second season. The Bucs, who moved up 4 spots in CBS Sports rankings to number 9, says Baker Mayfield came up big in the opener against the Commanders with 4 touchdown passes. They are the team to beat in the division. The Saints. Derek Carr lit up the Panthers as the Saints got off to a good start, but was that them or just feasting on a bad opponent? They moved up 2 spots from 27th to 25th. What's different here? Explain this to me. One team has Todd Bowles. He has 2 winning seasons to his credit. Only 1 with the Bucs. His other one was in his first year as a head coach of the Jets. Then he won 4 games. I think he won a maximum of 4 games each of the next 3 years, then got fired. His first year as the Bucs head coach, taking over for Bruce Arians, a longtime offensive wizard head coach. He went 8-9 with Tom Brady, won the division, and then went 9-8 and won the division on a tiebreaker with Dave Canales, his offensive coordinator, shipping out to Carolina. You replaced him with Liam Cohen, and things went well in week 1. Great, fantastic. Let's give him credit for that. The Saints, Dennis Allen, again, coming off a 9-8 season, veteran quarterback, Baker Mayfield, Derek Carr, this is the same goddamn guy. New offensive coordinator, went really well. They played the Panthers. It's stupid. Let's see. Pro Football Talk. They have them at 23rd. Their explanation, they won't be seeing the Panthers every week. Okay, but the Bucs won't be seeing the Commanders every week. And we have them at number 6. Let's see. Again, okay, here we go. USA Today has them at 24th. Guess who's 6-0 in week 1 over the past 6 seasons? Best in the NFL? The same team that scored on its first 9-drive Sunday. 24th. It's just like, guys, if you're not going to give me a reason that you're going to put the Saints at the bottom of the NFL in your power rankings, then just admit you're full of shit. Because this is what's happening. Everyone is trying to slowly back off their take as if all along they were like, well, this team can beat bad teams. We all knew they could beat bad teams, except you didn't because you had them at number 28th in your power rankings. If you have someone at number 28 in your power rankings, that means that you think they are one of the worst teams in the NFL. And the worst teams in the NFL are not going out and beating other bad NFL teams by 37 points. And the only reason I'm making a big deal out of this is because this is what's happening. Rather than people overreacting, and moving teams up at a reasonable rate relative to what they have done and saying, maybe I was wrong. What these folks are going to do instead is just gradually climb up the rankings so that by midseason, when everyone kind of comes to the conclusion, the correct conclusion, that instead of the Saints being a bottom 10, bottom 5 team, like these idiots have convinced themselves they are, they all come to the obvious conclusion that the Saints are actually an above average team, a mid-tier team that has the potential to win 10 games, make a playoff run. Aaron Schatz, I give Aaron Schatz credit. So he does the football almanac every year, and he's been here all along. And like these are the folks that you should be listening to, not these idiots who do power rankings. And he says, first, let's acknowledge that this wasn't just a win for the Saints. This was a colossal win. The Saints outgained the Panthers 379 yards to 193 yards and won the turnover margin +2. Their win would have been even bigger if they had been able to sustain drives into the red zone instead of kicking 4 field goals, including 2 over 50 yards. The Panthers' only touchdown came near the end of the third quarter when they were already losing 37-3. He says, I'm not arguing that the big week 1 win means that the Saints will dominate all season. I'm just arguing the same thing I was arguing in the preseason, which is the New Orleans Saints are an average or maybe slightly above average team, not a bad team. He said the same thing about Derek Carr, and the same thing is true. I think the week 1 victory helped demonstrate this even against the Panthers. But yeah, and that's where we are all going to land. My issue is, instead of admitting they were just wrong, these power rankings folks are relying on this idea that, like, well, the Panthers are just bad. Prove it to me again. Go jump off a cliff. I don't buy it. I think, like, there's this kind of resounding idea that if you don't like a team, if you don't like the coach, if you don't like the quarterback, that all equals bad. And people don't want to admit that their ideas are not always correct. And sometimes you just gotta figure it out. And that's why I'm thrilled. I am thrilled that we're going to be able to go talk about this. Now, my concern is that Francine is becoming an issue for the Saints in terms of their prep. And they're going to walk into Dallas at a disadvantage in a matchup that was already going to be difficult for them to win. And it's going to be tough if they walk in there and look like an unprepared team, if they look like they did on Thursday Night Football in LA, right? Like, that's what I'm worried about, because what's going to end up happening in that conversation is there's going to be no idea given to, like, well, this might have gone differently if there wasn't a hurricane roiling through New Orleans all week. But everyone's going to say, yep, it was just the Panthers if the Saints lose that game. So they're not going to get any grace. We're just going to continue to have these conversations. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what these power rankings say. I just think it's so funny to watch these folks in real time not admit that they've ever had a bad take, but be like, well, they didn't prove me wrong. It was this. And we'll see how that goes. I'm just bringing it up now so that as we go throughout the course of the season, I intend to do this every Tuesday to kind of make sure that these changes, the adjustments are keep taken into account, and we'll go from there. But at the end of the day, I assure you the coaches don't mind. If I'm a coach of a team, I'm sitting there like, oh, please continue to tell me how bad we are. Continue, please, because it just saves me so much energy trying to come up with how I'm going to motivate my team this week. and we'll go from there. But we'll have to see. I'm hopeful to get another pod to you this week. I'm hopeful to get someone from the Cowboys side of things to come on here and tell us what all to expect. Tell us why Micah Parsons is going to wreck everything. Derek Carr compared him to Von Miller today, which is a bold comparison, but I can see it. And we'll see how that goes. We'll see if that just wrecks everything. And we're back here talking about how the Saints don't have a chance this time next week. But either way, we'll have to find out. Hopefully, if I have power, I'll try to get you that episode to either post Thursday evening or Friday morning. If I don't have power, I'll try to do something, but no guarantees. Obviously, the radio station is all Hurricane right now, so it's going to be tough for me to get Steve on, but we'll figure it out. Either way, thanks everyone for listening. This is Inside Black and Gold. Saints take on the Cowboys week 2, noon in Dallas. We'll be flying out there on Saturday. I'm excited. I've never been to Jerry World. That's there's only a few stadiums this year that I get to go to for the first time. Arizona was the first. And I'm kind of trying to decide whether I counted if I was there in the preseason because it doesn't feel the same. But Arizona was a first. San Francisco was a first. Dallas is going to be a first. Kansas City is going to be a first. And MetLife for the Giants is going to be a first. I think that's it. I think those are the only stadiums I'm going to for the first time because we're going back to Green Bay, which obviously we were there last year. Hopefully I don't get caught in a kicking net this time. And we are going to, obviously, all the NFC South stadiums again. It's going to be a good time. But, all right. Who dat? Go Saints. BZL. Watch out for trees.